This happened a few years ago. I was 32 and trying to shake off the isolation of freelancing. I got invited to a New Year's Eve party by an old college friend. I thought it would be nice to reconnect and maybe have some fun. The gathering took place in a big old Victorian house. It felt cold inside, and the scent of wood polish hung in the air. Laughter echoed in the dimly lit rooms, and it all seemed pretty normal at first. I've never stopped thinking about that night. As the party went on, I noticed a couple in a corner. They were talking too quietly. Their eyes darted around, and they suddenly fell silent when I looked at them. I felt like an intruder. I shrugged it off and went back to chatting with other guests, but a nagging feeling stuck with me. There was something strange about them. At some point, I wandered down a long hallway. That's when I saw something. A shadow flitted past my vision. It was quick, maybe a trick of the light. I shook my head and tried to dismiss it. My heart raced a little. I convinced myself it was nothing, but it left me feeling uneasy. Later, I stood by the bar when I heard clinking sounds. Glasses were clinking together, but no one was there. I could see people, but they all seemed far too engaged in their conversations. I felt my skin prickle. It was as if the noise called to me, but I didn't know why. I looked back toward the couple, and they were gone. I thought maybe they had stepped outside. I went back to the party, but moments later I heard their whispers. It was as if they were just behind me. I turned my head, but the room was filled with chatter, and no one was near. It sent shivers down my spine. Why did I feel like they were talking about me? By midnight, the atmosphere changed. I overheard the couple speaking again, but their words were muffled and frantic. I remember the clock counting down, but my attention was solely on them. Were they in trouble? I wanted to ask what was wrong, but when I turned, they had vanished. It felt like they melted away into the crowd. The countdown reached 0. People cheered, bells rang, but I couldn't celebrate. I was stuck, wondering what I missed. That's when I overheard someone mention the tragedy tied to the house. Their words clung to my mind. I tried to confront them about it, but all I found was an empty corner. Did I imagine it all? I still ask myself that even now. Whatever happened that night left me uneasy every New Year's since. There's something about that couple and the way they vanished that stays with me. Maybe something was in that house. I can't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. Then I looked back at the clock. The time felt wrong. I blinked, and suddenly it felt like I was being watched. I turned around. No one was there. I shifted my weight, feeling the hairs on the back of my neck rise. I was losing my grip on the party. I needed fresh air, a moment to clear my head. I stepped outside onto the porch, the cold biting at my skin. The night sky was bright with stars, but they felt distant and cold, just like me. As I stood there trying to shake off the creeping sense of dread, I noticed the silhouette of a figure across the yard. It was difficult to see clearly, but something made me uneasy. The figure moved slowly, glancing back toward the house, then quickly disappearing behind a large tree. My curiosity piqued. I told myself it was probably just a guest looking for privacy. Still, a tight knot formed in my stomach. I took a cautious step forward. "Hello?" I called out, but my voice felt weak in the cold air. No answer, just the faint sound of music from inside the house. I hesitated, then decided it was worth checking out. Maybe it was the couple I had seen earlier. I crept closer to the tree, straining to see what was behind it. That's when I saw something glimmer against the moonlight. A small metal object lay on the ground. It looked like a locket. I picked it up, feeling the coolness of the metal against my palm. My heart raced. It was delicate, with intricate designs. I opened it, finding a tiny portrait of what looked like a woman, her eyes wide and terrified. A chill ran through me. I felt like I stumbled upon something I wasn't meant to find. I shoved the locket into my pocket and turned back toward the house, feeling a sudden shift in the atmosphere. The laughter echoed less lively, as if something had dampened the mood. When I re-entered, the room felt heavier. The guests looked different. A few stared in my direction, their smiles fading as I passed. My instincts screamed that something wasn't right. I walked to the bar to collect my thoughts, but there, I caught sight of a figure in the corner. It was the couple again. They were standing together, whispering urgently, their expressions strained. I felt drawn to them but held back, unsure of what to say. The woman looked directly at me, her eyes pleading, as if she wanted to reveal something. My chest tightened. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and a cold breeze swept through the room, the laughter turning into murmurs. As people shifted their focus to the couple, I saw them exchange fearful glances, and just like before, they vanished, disappearing into the growing crowd. My hands trembled as I set my drink down. I couldn't let it go this time. I needed answers. I took a deep breath and searched the room for anyone who might know about the couple or the house's history. Just then, a voice cut through the chatter. "I wouldn't go looking for them if I were you." I turned to see a man standing nearby, his face shadowed but eyes glinting with awareness. My heart sank. "Why not?" I asked, hoping for clarity. He swallowed hard, glancing toward where the couple had stood. "They don't belong in this world anymore." His words hung heavy in the air, pulling my breath short. A sense of urgency flooded over me. "What do you mean?" But he had already turned away, melting back into the crowd as quickly as he'd appeared. I was left alone, confusion and fear swirling in my mind. What did he know? Before I could process anything further, the lights flickered again, plunging the room into darkness. And in that moment, I knew I wasn't the only one looking for answers. The darkness was thick and disorienting. For a moment I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I could hear the whispers of the guests swell and then fall into a hush, creating an atmosphere dense with tension. My eyes strained to adjust, but all I saw was the faint silhouette of people shifting around me. Then, just as suddenly, the lights flickered back on. The crowd stood still in statuesque poses, their faces pale and tight-lipped. It was unsettling. I scanned the room, searching for the couple or anyone who might offer an explanation. And then I saw them, standing at the far end of the room. The couple hadn't vanished. They were back, their faces more serious than before. I felt a pull in my gut, drawing me toward them. But as I walked closer, people started to move in front of me, acting as if they were blocking my path. It felt intentional. I pushed through, determined not to let them slip away again. Just as I reached the couple, the lights dimmed once more, casting long shadows that seemed to wrap around me. For a brief moment, I thought I saw the woman turn her head, her eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "There's something you need to know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, but it sliced through the noise. I leaned in, straining to hear over the murmurs surrounding us. Suddenly, the lights went out again, plunging us back into darkness. I gasped, feeling the panic rise in my throat. Then, I heard it. A crash from behind. The sound of glass shattering echoed sharply, followed by gasps of surprise and horror. The lights flickered back on, and I spun around to find a large mirror had fallen from the wall, shattered pieces gleaming on the floor like jagged teeth. My heart raced. Something in the air felt charged, like a storm before the rain. The guests scattered, some gasping, others shouting. The elegant party had turned into chaos. In the midst of it all, a cold breeze brushed past me again. It felt different this time, like a whisper through my hair. That's when I realized something was off. The couple was gone. The urgency to find them surged within me again. What did they know? What was this place hiding? As I turned back, I caught the eye of the man who had warned me moments before. He stood nearby, his expression grave. "You shouldn't have come looking for them," he said, urgency lacing his words. Before I could respond, he was swallowed by the crowd, leaving me with more questions. I had to leave. The locket in my pocket suddenly felt heavier, a weight that demanded my attention. As I turned to exit, the isolated corner where the couple had stood looked empty, and the air felt charged with unspoken fears. I took a step toward the door, but just then, a shadow flickered at the edges of my vision. Someone was still in the house. My stomach twisted as I caught the glint of metallic light. I felt the chill wash over me again, but this time it was accompanied by a sense of urgency. What I thought I was searching for might be far more dangerous than I could handle. Then I saw it. Behind where the couple had stood, a doorway I hadn't noticed before creaked open slightly. It called to me, a faint pull whispering for me to come closer. I hesitated, knowing that every fiber of my being screamed to run. But questions simmered in my mind. What lay beyond that door? Compelled by fear and determination, I took a step forward, knowing I was about to uncover something I might not be ready for. As I approached the door, shadows danced along the walls, casting eerie shapes that made my pulse quicken. I peered into the dark space beyond, the air thick with something unplaceable. My instincts screamed at me to turn back, but the mystery tugged at my curiosity. I stepped over the threshold, feeling the chills swallow me whole. The door creaked shut behind me, sealing off the chaotic party. For a moment I hesitated, my heart pounding against my ribcage as I scanned the small room. It was dimly lit with a flickering bulb hanging from the ceiling. Dust motes floated in the faint glow, making the air feel heavy and expectant. I noticed a worn wooden table in the corner stacked high with old books. The titles were barely visible, but one caught my eye. The Truth Beneath the Surface. I reached for it, flipping through the fragile pages filled with notes scrawled in ink that had faded over time. It felt like I was meant to find this, yet I wasn't sure why. Suddenly I heard a rustling sound coming from a shadowy corner of the room. My breath caught. I turned slowly, half expecting to see the couple lurking there. Instead, it was a pile of discarded drapes that had fallen to the floor. I let out a shaky breath and forced myself to focus. Then I saw it. A dark shape scuttled across the floor, something small but unnerving. A rat? It vanished behind a large trunk tucked against the wall. My heart raced as a mixture of dread and curiosity twisted in my stomach. What else was hidden in this room? I crept closer to the trunk, compelled by an unfamiliar sense of urgency. Lifting the heavy lid, I was struck by a musty smell. Inside, several objects were haphazardly strewn about. An old photograph, a tarnished locket, the same design as the one I had in my pocket, and a key that glinted in the dim light. My fingers trembled as I picked up the locket, its cold surface sending a shiver through me. I opened it carefully, revealing a faded picture of the couple from the party. They looked younger, their smiles bright and carefree. But there was an unsettling feeling in their eyes, a glimmer of something else that chilled me to the bone. Just as I was processing this discovery, I heard footsteps echoing outside the door. A wave of panic shot through me. I quickly returned everything to the trunk, closing it as quietly as possible. I pressed myself against the wall, holding my breath. The footsteps grew louder, and I realized it wasn't just one person. There were at least two. Then the door swung open. My heart dropped as I found myself staring into the faces of two strangers. They were dressed in formal wear, their expressions blank and unreadable. I felt frozen, unable to move or make a sound. "What are you doing here?" one of them asked in a low voice, their eyes narrowing as they took a step closer. My heart raced. I couldn't let them know I had uncovered the locket, but the weight of the key and the photograph felt like anchors pulling me down into dread. "Answer me," the second one demanded, tension crackling in the air. I knew I had to think fast. Whatever I said could tip these strangers off about what I had found. Panic surged within me again, and I realized escaping was my only option. Just as I turned to flee, the first person reached out, grabbing my arm. "You shouldn't have come here," they hissed. The door behind them creaked wider, and I saw shadows closing in from outside the room. My pulse raced. I was trapped. I jerked my arm away, adrenaline surging through me. My voice faltered. I didn't know what I was doing here, and I certainly didn't have a good explanation. My eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape route. The way the shadows moved made me feel like they were watching me. "Stay still," the second stranger hissed, his voice low, threatening. I felt their eyes assessing me, hunting for the truth that lay just beneath my skin. "We need to know what you've seen." Before I could respond, a loud bang erupted behind me. Someone had crashed into the doorframe of the party, creating a distraction. Both strangers turned their heads toward the sound, their gazes momentarily lifting from me. It was my chance. With a swift motion, I slipped past them and out into the party, my heart pounding louder than the music that still thumped in the background. I lost myself in the crowd, weaving through guests who laughed and drank, oblivious to the danger I had just fled. I pushed against the throng of bodies, glancing back at the door. Had they followed me? I couldn't see them in the haze of dim lighting and swirling colors. A sense of urgency twisted deep in my chest. I needed to know what was going on. As I maneuvered deeper into the party, the atmosphere shifted. I caught snippets of conversation that hinted at secrets buried just beneath the festivities. The couple from the photo. It couldn't be a coincidence. They had to be connected to the people in this room. My mind raced to piece it all together. Then I spotted a figure standing alone, away from the chatter. It was a woman with striking features, her dark hair a stark contrast to her silver dress. She was clutching a glass of champagne, her gaze fixed ahead, as if she could see through the festive facade. I felt compelled to approach her, as if she might hold the answers I desperately needed. "Hey," I started, my voice low, careful not to draw attention. "Do you know anything about the couple? The ones in that old photo?" Her eyes flickered to mine, and a shadow passed over her face. "You shouldn't be asking about them," she said, her tone grave. "Those who know their story don't talk about it." "Why? What happened to them?" I pressed, my curiosity overpowering my fear. I could sense there was something deeply sinister lurking underneath the party's surface. She hesitated, glancing around as if checking for eavesdroppers. "They didn't just disappear," she whispered. "They found something they shouldn't have." Her gaze drifted back over my shoulder, and her expression turned to one of panic. "You need to leave. Now." Before I could ask why, she slipped away into the crowd. A wave of confusion washed over me. I felt the weight of those words, the warning echoed in my mind. Someone knew what I had discovered, and I was being drawn deeper into something far more dangerous than I had anticipated. Then everything went dark. The lights above flickered, casting long shadows across the dance floor, and I felt a chill creep up my spine. Something was wrong. I could sense it in the air. Panic surged again as I tried to find my way back toward the exit. But the crowd closed in around me, and I felt trapped once more. I stumbled forward, disoriented. The music distorted, reverberating through the darkness. I pressed my hands against the walls, trying to steady myself. My heart raced as I fought to make sense of the chaos. A wave of noise erupted as guests laughed and cheered, oblivious to the sudden shift in atmosphere. I pushed through the crowd, my eyes scanning for any hint of light. The air felt thick, almost suffocating. I needed to find the exit, but every direction seemed uncertain. The panic that threatened to boil over inside me grew louder, urging me to escape. Just then, a piercing scream cut through the din. It was sharp and raw, turning heads in every direction. I froze instinctively as people clustered closer together, drawn like moths to a flame. Curiosity overcame fear for a moment. I needed to know what had happened. I followed the flow of bodies toward the sound, weaving past startled guests. As I made my way closer, I saw a group gathered in a circle. Their faces were painted with shock and disbelief. I pushed in, desperate for answers. In the center, a woman was crumpled on the floor, her face pale and contorted in fear. Someone was shaking her gently, calling out her name. "What happened?" I whispered to the person next to me. "She saw something," the stranger replied, his eyes darting over the crowd. "And they're trying to make it disappear." Instinct kicked in again. I didn't want to know. Part of me wanted to disappear too. But another part needed to understand the danger lurking around me. I edged closer, desperate for clarity. "What did you see?" I asked the woman, who looked up at me, her eyes wide and frantic. "They came for me," she stammered, her breath shaky. "They're looking for those who know too much. They're here." The weight of her words pressed down on me. My thoughts raced back to the strangers, their demanding looks and their urgent questions. They knew something, and now she did too. But what was it? Just then, the lights flickered back to life, cutting through the darkness and the tension. People clapped and laughed, unaware of the undercurrent of fear. I could see the two men from before lurking near the entrance, scanning the crowd. Their eyes locked onto mine, piercing and cold. My heart stopped. They had found me again. I turned and fled, weaving back into the crowd, my mind racing. I needed to find a way out, but every second wasted was another moment closer to being caught. The music resumed, but I couldn't hear it anymore over the pounding of my heart. That's when I saw it. A door at the far end of the room, slightly ajar. It might be my best chance. I started moving toward it, adrenaline propelling me forward. But as I reached for the handle, strong hands gripped my shoulders from behind. I spun around, fear twisting in my stomach. The two men loomed over me, their expressions unreadable. "Let's talk," one of them said. I didn't think. I pulled free and bolted for the door, hoping it wouldn't be too late. I burst through the door, feeling the cool air hit my face like a splash of cold water. The hallway beyond was dimly lit, and I stumbled forward, not daring to look back. My breath came in quick bursts as I raced down the corridor, my feet pounding against the hard floor. The sound of laughter and music faded behind me, replaced by the unsettling silence of the empty passage. I pressed on, pushing through an overwhelming wave of fear. I needed a plan, a place to hide until I could figure out what was happening. I turned a corner and came to another door, this one marked with a sign that read, "Staff Only." My instinct screamed at me to keep moving, to find somewhere safe. But I hesitated. Maybe there would be answers in there. Maybe I'd find someone who knew what was going on. I took a gamble and pushed the door open, stepping inside. The room was cluttered with tables and chairs stacked haphazardly, and the smell of stale food hung in the air. It felt like a world apart from the chaos I just left behind. Then I heard it. A low murmuring that sent chills down my spine. I crept further into the room, squinting to see through the shadows. My heart raced again, pounding in my ears. The murmurs grew louder, and I began to make out distinct voices. "She can't know," one voice hissed. "It has to remain a secret." "She saw something. They won't stop," another voice replied, laced with urgency. I pressed against the wall, trying to stay hidden. They were talking about me. I couldn't make out the speakers, but their anxiety painted a bleak picture. Whoever they were involved in whatever was going on. And now I was caught in the middle of it. "Do you have the package?" the first voice asked. "We need to secure it before she remembers more." "Just keep her away from the main party," The second voice insisted. If they get to her, it's all over. Panic gripped me. I took a step back, wanting to slip out while they were distracted. But as I turned, I crashed into a metal cart piled high with dirty dishes. The clang echoed loudly in the silence. "Who's there?" the first voice snapped. I froze, terror coursing through me. Then I bolted for the exit. I burst through the door and back into the hallway, but my escape was short-lived. The two men were waiting for me. "Back already?" one of them said, smirking. "We told you we needed to talk." I glanced around, eyes darting wildly. There was nowhere to run. I backed away, heart racing as they approached. Just when it seemed they would close in on me, a loud alarm echoed through the building. Red lights began to flash, and the men momentarily paused, uncertainty flickering across their faces. "Move!" one of them shouted, turning to look at the exits. I didn't think twice. I dashed past them as chaos erupted, guests screaming and pouring out of the main area. Everything felt surreal, like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I stumbled outside, the cold night air hitting me like a shock. But as I glanced over my shoulder, I saw the men emerging from the door, urgency etched in their expressions. I had barely escaped, but this was only the beginning. I needed to understand what I had stumbled into before they caught up with me again. I ran into the night, the concrete crunching beneath my feet. My mind was racing. I searched for somewhere to go, somewhere safe. The world around me felt distorted, like a low-budget film stripped of all color. My breaths were shallow and panicked. I couldn't shake the feeling that those men were right behind me. Ahead, a small alleyway caught my eye. I turned down it, hoping the shadows would shield me. Pressing my back against the cool brick wall, I listened intently. Was I imagining it, or could I hear the sound of footsteps approaching? I held my breath, wishing I could be invisible. "Did you see her?" a voice called out from the main street. It was one of the men. They were too close. Panic flared again, and I swallowed hard, forcing myself to remain quiet. "She won't get far," the other man replied, his tone laced with annoyance. "We need to split up. You go that way." He pointed in the direction I'd just come from. "I'll check around here." A knot twisted in my stomach. What did they want with me? Why was I suddenly the center of this terrifying game? Holding my breath, I peered around the corner of the alley. The men were already moving away, but I had to act fast. I turned away from their voices and continued deeper into the alley. The darkness pressed in, and I realized I needed to figure out a way to escape. The adrenaline surged within me, and I felt an odd mix of fear and determination. At the end of the alley, I spotted an abandoned building, hardly more than a shell. I scanned the entrance. Should I risk it? A sense of desperation nudged me forward. I slipped through the door, wincing as it creaked. Inside, the air was stale and thick with dust. I could barely see. I gave my eyes a moment to adjust, listening for any sounds of footsteps outside. There was only silence. As I moved deeper into the building, I spotted scattered debris and old furniture. But then something caught my eye. There was a flicker of light coming from a room on the left. Cautiously, I made my way towards it, holding my breath again. When I reached the doorway, the light illuminated a strange sight. A table in the middle of the room was covered with various objects, papers, a small box, and what looked like a notebook. I cautiously stepped inside, glancing around for any signs of life. That's when I saw it. The notebook was open, and the pages were filled with drawings, sketches of figures, and strange symbols. My heart raced as I recognized one of the drawings. It was unmistakable, a sketch of me. Suddenly, I heard a door slam shut in the distance. I whipped around, panic rising again. Whoever was outside could be coming for me, but I couldn't leave without learning more. What were they planning? Just as I was about to scoop up the notebook, a shadow crossed the doorway behind me. I turned, and my breath caught in my throat. Someone was standing there. I had to make a choice. Do I confront them or hide? Before I could decide, they stepped forward, and the world shifted around me. My heart raced as the figure in the doorway stepped into the dim light. A man stood there, eyes wide and wild, his face obscured by shadows. He looked just as startled as I was. Panic surged through me. Was he friend or foe? "Who are you?" I managed to choke out, my voice barely a whisper. "I could ask the same," he replied, his gaze flitting nervously around the room. "What are you doing here?" Before I could reply, a loud crash echoed from outside, making us both jump. The men were close. We didn't have much time. "I need to hide," I said, urgency cracking my voice. He nodded, and without another word, grabbed my arm and pulled me deeper into the room. We ducked behind a battered couch, the smell of mildew heavy in the air. I could hear the pounding footsteps growing louder. "Who are they?" he asked, his voice low. "I don't know," I said, shaking my head. "They were looking for me." The footsteps stopped, and I felt my pulse in my throat. The door creaked open and I held my breath, praying they wouldn't come in. Two silhouettes loomed in the doorway, filling the space with their relentless presence. "She has to be here," one said, frustration evident in his voice. "We should split up again. You take the back." The other raked a hand through his hair, a gesture that sent shivers through me. "What do they want with you?" The man beside me whispered, his breath warm against my ear. "I don't know. I swear I was just—" "Listen," he interrupted, his face serious. "If they find you, you won't survive." I blinked in surprise. His words felt harsh, but I understood the weight of them. I needed to think, to find a way out. As I listened to their voices, a plan began to form. I couldn't just hide forever. But it required me to be brave, to confront whatever awaited me outside in the dark. "Can you distract them?" I asked, my voice trembling. "I'll try to sneak out." For a moment, the man hesitated, uncertainty crossing his face. Then he nodded, resolve setting in. "I'll buy you some time. Just be careful." He shifted slightly, preparing himself. I took a deep breath, knowing I had to act fast. Just then, a voice called out from the other side of the building. "She couldn't have gotten far. Check the basement." Fear coursed through me. The last place I wanted to end up was down there, but I didn't have a choice. If I wanted to escape, I had to move. With one last look at the man, I squeezed past him and darted toward the back door, praying he would hold them off long enough. I flung the door open and stumbled into the darkness. The air was colder, the night sharper, but before I could take a step, I heard a shout behind me. I turned, heart pounding, just as the door to the room slammed shut. And then everything went black. I woke up slowly, disoriented, the taste of dirt and dust in my mouth. The chilling dark enveloped me as I blinked against the dim light filtering through an imperceptible opening in the wall. Where had I ended up this time? Panic surged, and I scrambled to my feet, brushing the remnants of the floor off my clothes. My pulse raced as the memories crashed over me. The party, the shadows, the fear. Had those men caught me after all? I could still hear echoes of their voices, the urgent warnings ringing in my head. They were looking for me, and somehow I had to get out. I forced myself to breathe, scanning my surroundings. It looked like I was in a small cellar, lined with stone walls. No windows. The air felt dank, musty, like it hadn't breathed in ages. I could barely make out shapes in the darkness, crates stacked in the corners. A few old tools lying askew on a wooden table. Another noise outside loomed closer. My heart sank. They had to be searching for me. I scoured the room, looking for a way out. A shadow flickered at the top of the stairs leading out of the cellar. It was a silhouette, watching, waiting. My breath hitched. Was it one of them, or was it someone who could help? Feeling the surge of desperation, I rushed to the stairs, cautious but quick, my hands gripping the railing as I ascended quietly. With a soft push, The wooden door creaked open, revealing a sliver of light. I peered through and hesitated. Everything around me felt like it buzzed with tension, the air thick and heavy. I pushed the door the rest of the way open, slipping through the narrow entrance into the hallway above. It was eerily quiet. Too quiet. I decided to stay low and stay quiet, heart pounding. There had to be an exit around here somewhere. As I slinked down the corridor, I thought about speaking to the stranger who had helped me in the room just moments before. I could only hope he had made it out, that he wasn't caught. I had to find him, or at least find the truth about what was happening and why those men were after me. Suddenly, the familiar voices broke through the quiet. My heart sank as I realized they were getting closer. I hurried my pace, scrambling to find a door, any door that might lead to safety. A flicker of panic washed over me as I turned a corner, spotting another wooden door at the end. But as I ran toward it, I felt a cold rush of wind behind me, as if something had brushed past, chilling me to the bone. I spun around, catching only glimpses of shadows darting in the corner of my vision. Were they chasing me already? I reached for the door handle, praying it would open, my mind racing. The voices were louder now, each hurried step I took echoing in the hollow space of my chest. Just a little closer, I thought. I threw the door open and stepped through, tumbling into a small, cluttered room filled with old furniture and cobwebs. My breath came in ragged gasps, adrenaline fueling my need to escape. But as I turned to shut it behind me, the men emerged down the hall, their eyes locking onto mine. "There!" one shouted, lunging forward, but I slammed the door shut and locked it, reinforcing it with a nearby chair. I turned to assess my surroundings. The room felt different compared to the rest of the house, lighter somehow. A strange warmth enveloped me, but it held undertones of uncertainty. A large mirror hung crookedly on the far wall, dust caking its surface. I noticed it wasn't entirely opaque. There was something behind the glass, a bizarre shimmer that seemed to glow slightly. Before I could process my surroundings, I heard banging on the door. Panic surged again, but my eyes remained drawn to the mirror. Without thinking, I stepped closer. I pressed my hand against the cold surface, my heart racing in trepidation. The door buckled behind me. My skin prickled. I needed to make a choice, but something about the reflection felt almost magnetic, pulling me toward it. Could this be my way out? In a split-second decision, I shoved my fears aside and leaned into the mirror. A strange warmth enveloped me as the glass rippled and shifted, absorbing my form as if I were some liquid flowing into a current. Suddenly the world tilted. Everything spun, the banging on the door growing distorted, muffled as I spiraled away from the conflict, leaving behind the two men and all their questions. I felt disoriented, as if I were escaping into an entirely different reality. I landed, tumbling onto a soft patch of grass. The air was different here, fresh and invigorating, although the faint remnants of fear clung to me like the last bits of winter. I blinked up at an infinite sky, stars twinkling above. Just a few paces away I spotted the couple, the very same I had seen at the party. They stood together under a large oak, their expressions unreadable but calm. Had I truly escaped, or was this just another illusion? Time seemed to stand still as I tried to make sense of it all. Where was I now? Had I found freedom, or just a different kind of prison? I still didn't understand what I'd stumbled upon or what the future held. The danger lingered, just out of sight, as uncertainty swirled around me. I took a step forward, the pull of the unknown hanging heavy in the air. What I had learned or seen haunted me, questions still echoing in my mind. The couple looked at me, their gazes laden with secrets, their truths untold. For now, I was safe. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I had crossed into something deeper, something that would change everything I thought I knew. I still didn't know if I had truly escaped, or if I had simply traded one darkness for another. I tried not to think about it too much, but sometimes the thoughts crept back. I moved away from the house and into my life, but the events of that night lingered like a half-remembered dream that I couldn't quite shake off.